Start us off, Jay. You have another poem for us for this podcast?
I do. I was thinking the centerpiece, at least in my view, of Act 3 is the fight, the double murder. If I'm spoiling it, that just means you didn't do your homework. So I was thinking this is a poem that's a side, an angle, an approach regarding becoming an older person, something that Mercutio, something that most of the young characters in this play never get to become. It's from Ted Kooser's Pulitzer Prize-winning collection, Delights and Shadows, which came out in 2004. And it's a poem called Tatoo. And I just really like Ted Kooser a lot, so check him out. Tatoo. What once was meant to be a statement, a dripping dagger held in the fist of a shuddering heart, is now just a bruise on a bony old shoulder, the spot where vanity once punched him hard and the ache lingered on. He looks like someone you had to reckon with, strong as a stallion, fast and ornery, but on this chilly morning, as he walks between the tables at a yard sale with the sleeves of his tight black t-shirt rolled up to show us who he was, he is only another old man picking up broken tools and putting them back, his heart gone soft and blue with stories. So that's something that none of the people in this poem live long enough to even experience, sadly. So this is in honor of their untimely demises.
Yeah, I think that guy is Mercutio walking down the aisles had he not been stabbed.
That's right.
I know he got a tattoo, and he would show it off. That's my view.
He was bringing out the gun show at the yard sale.
Oh yeah,
in
sun's
Verona.
out, guns out. Yeah, he's doing the whole thing.
Maybe that was subconsciously where I was going.
It might
I just
be.
don't want to stay in my subconscious much longer, so get out.
One little glimpse. Vanity punched him hard. That was a nice line.
All right.
Vanity punched him
I
hard.
love his heart gone soft and blue with stories.
Ooh, I know.
I think Kooser was like he's retired now, he's older. Was like a business guy, insurance guy.
Yeah.
Like for a long time. And then I'll just write poetry and Pulitzer Prize winning poet. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. That is a nice opening. Tattoos. Yeah. Yeah. But that sentiment is almost entirely foreign to this play. Old people, like you say, the wistfulness of the future. There is no future in this play. Not only are they all literally dead, but none of the scenes really look to the future, I don't think. They're all so intimately in the eternal now, even beautifully. But that's one thing missing from this play.
I think it's because kids are at the heart of it. I mean, we have children and we teach children. Do they think a lot about 40 years from now? I mean, they look at us. We're in our 40s.
Yeah.
Even though you can't see us, you'd never guess that we both look so young. But anyway, we're both in our 40s.
No, you're right
being
there.
Like 15, thinking, 45 years old, 48.
Yeah.
Like pretty much dead. Like there's really not much you can do.
Literally unimaginable. So it may as well not exist.
Like that great Paul Simon song, Old Friends. How strange, to be 70. You know what I mean? Like how just strange it is to be young and imagine being old. Anyway.
No, that's good. I think the future's not there because, and this is the continuity, I'm trying to keep some continuity of thought here, because what's at the heart of the play is not just kids, but is true love in its essential, undiluted form. And that, sadly, this is why this play is a tragedy in my view, that cannot exist in this world. Sorry.
Yep.
And that's why there's no future. Maybe it is. Love has some future in the world, but not this kind of love. Not the mysterious, essential. Maybe arranged marriages. Those have a future, and marriages where lots of sacrifices have been made to make them happen, and love that goes on for good reasons, but not that balcony scene love. That's I think that's what this means. It doesn't exist. It can't live here. That's a dark point, maybe. Well, hey, we're on to we're on to Act 3, and this is essential. This is the center of the play, right? It is the dead center of the play. And if you're looking for that for that structure, Aristotle and others, talked about of the tying of the knot, the rising action, complication, all that, and then the peripeteia, the turn, and then the untying of the knot. Then we're in that center part here. There are Acts 1 and 2 come before it. Acts 4 and 5 come after it. If you count up all the scenes, which I've done, there are 24. Acts 3, 1, 3, 2, if you count from Act 1, Scene 1, 12 acts up, you get to 3, 1. If you count from the end, Act 5, the last scene, back 12 acts, you get to like 3, 2. So we're scenes 3, 1, 3, 2 are our centers, depending on which way you count it. So we're right here mathematically at the dead center. And I think also we're going to talk about being at an actual dramatic turning point, to a meaningfully dramatic turning point, which is placed right at the middle, like a nice piece of architecture. The vanishing point of the story is here, maybe. So let's do our 3 points. Jay, we're doing the obvious but essential. So let's start there. Act 3, obvious but essential. Do we have the same obvious but essential?
I have the street fight and the double murder with a particular emphasis on Mercutio's language.
Ooh, Mercutio's language.
I know you're a big. I'm going to get you a Mercutio shirt for Christmas. I can't wait. It's going to say, "What would Mercutio do?" And the answer is probably make a bunch of inappropriate jokes.
Hey, that's WWMD. I mean,
that's right.
What does Mercutio do? WMD. Yeah, and he's WMD in this play too, maybe in some way.
He is a weapon mass destruction. That's right.
He is. He actually is, which I didn't talk about in Act 2, which I wanted to. I wanted to go off on Mercutio again because his only scene, is when the nurse comes out to meet up with.
He has fun with the nurse.
He has fun with her, and she's horrified by it, right? Like the thing she said, "Who was that guy? I hate that guy." And if he comes at me again, I'll take him down, or I'll get some people who will. So he's, and he has other, kind of perverse lines in the scene too. And when they're looking for Romeo, and where is he? Oh, he's off with Rosaline or Quivering Lap and other places that are quivering too. He's dependably himself. Well, we can't not talk about him here. I've got as a center something close. I put it in 2 words: obvious but essential. Tybalt dies. All right. Obvious but essential. Tybalt dies, but I want to dig in. I want to dig into that. So we're both talking about the murder. I don't know. Why don't you start us off with Mercutio's language, especially? Yeah. I like that. It bothers me, so I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
I like bothering you, so this should work out.
This will be great.
So we've had all these amazing scenes of love, teenage kids fighting to be together, breaking rules, defying the will of the entire community. Right. Fighting at adults to support them. So the next scene, we're reminded that none of these characters on stage in Act 3, Scene 1 in the beginning have been reading Romeo and Juliet, which to me is the problem with Shakespeare, is they're not reading the play. But anyway, Mercutio, Tybalt, Benvolio, they haven't been reading. So the last thing Tybalt is thinking about is he's really upset that Romeo crashed the Capulet party. So he's stewing over this. And I think Mercutio and Benvolio are in that position. This may be more implied by the text, but they're in that position of being friends with someone who now has a girlfriend and he's not really around.
Yeah.
So we have to, in a way, completely Control-Alt-Delete our thoughts and feelings about what just happened in Act 2, starting Act 3, because these people think and feel different things because they've experienced different things. So that's really important. So to me, it begins with Benvolio telling Mercutio, we need to get out of here. The day is hot, the Capulets are abroad, and we shall not escape a brawl, for in these days the hot blood is stirring. Yeah. So I wrote in my notes, is Benvolio the only person, his name means sort of like, bringing goodness, bringing peace.
Oh, okay.
But aside from that, is he the only person that can read that? Like the fact that we all know the feeling of a community, a neighborhood, a house. We have teenage kids. When there's tension, we better be careful. Yeah. He's the only one saying it. And Mercutio's response is, you must be like one of those guys who, when he goes into a tavern, slaps his sword on the table and said, "God, send me no need of thee. I don't want to fight. I'm kind of wimpy and I don't want a conflict." So it begins with Benvolio, putting out a very clear warning that you can't argue with. So the other thing I want to be mindful of is, I think it's at the end of the first scene when the prince comes out. I always remind anybody reading this play that living in the oxygen of every scene is the prince's warning. If you ever, fight in our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace.
Yes.
I'm not playing anymore.
Right.
So the next fight, the next conflict, the next parking ticket, for God's sake, hell's to pay. And by that, I mean death, life and death. So I think Benvolio is the most sort of prudent person. Everybody else, Tybalt is really emotional and hateful, and Mercutio is Mercutio. So I think what I want to point out is it's in a way a more developed echo of the first scene of the play, where words devolve into violence, where wordplay becomes murder. Yeah. So here is that again, and in a way, and you always are good about reminding us about the plausibility of a scene.
Yes.
I have to believe it, and I think we know every text invents its own rules for plausibility. What's plausible in Romeo and Juliet isn't even plausible in other Shakespeare.
That's right.
But so what we're conditioned in the first scene of the play to see wordplay lead to rape, murder, like those references. Mm-hmm. And here we get, Mercutio toying with Tybalt. There's this body humor, sexual humor, and then a murder. And I just want to point out, so we have Mercutio downplaying the warning from Tybalt. Tybalt, who's kind of a blunt instrument on feet, just says to Mercutio, "Thou art a villain." That's nice. This is to Romeo. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, it's all right. Where are you? What line are you on?
So I'm on page 117, and Tybalt says, "A word with one of you," and this just sounds like every great sarcastic character in Shakespeare. A word, make it a word and a blow. In other words, like a fight. And then the word consort, Mercutio, you consort with Romeo. It leads to a bunch of gay jokes.
Yeah.
And then it leads to penis jokes. Literally.
Right.
Is what's there. Benvolio interrupts, seeing a fight happen, and then Romeo shows up. I always wonder what would happen if Romeo just slept in. Like, how would the scene have moved?
Yeah.
Now, we go from Mercutio making joke. I have no sense that Mercutio got up that morning looking for a physical fight. I think he's a verbal fighter.
Yeah.
Tybalt is ready for a physical fight. And Romeo sort of wants to, it's interesting. He intimates, the reason that I have to love thee doth much excuse the appertaining rage to such a greeting. In other words, you have no idea I'm married to your cousin, which means we're family and I have to love you.
Yeah.
So don't greet me that way. I'm not a villain. And that's when Mercutio loses it and gets angry. So he goes from like sexual. I just want to look at like the spectrum of his reactions. He goes from sarcasm, threats about someone's manliness, to sexual penis jokes.
Yeah. To
now like making fun of. So it seems like he's constantly defaulting to making fun of other people's masculinity, and I think that's really interesting. Calm, dishonorable, vile submission, and then that's when Romeo gets in the way and Tybalt kills Mercutio. And here's why I'm focusing on the language. Then it shifts. I was hurt under your arm. Blunt instrument, no figurative language. Right? I was hurt under your arm. Mm-hmm. I have sped. Has he gone away and has nothing? Like he's not hurt at all. Literal, blunt, simple. He never talks that way. To a plague on both your houses. Blunt, simple. They all knew what plague was. We learn later on that plagues come back, and is a huge reason why Romeo doesn't get the message in the whole play. Right? So this isn't the only moment when plagues matter in this poem. So I just find Mercutio. So I'm not really passing judgment morally. What I'm looking at him as is he's sort of like he's like rolling a grenade into every scene. Like,
Yeah.
he's great if you're a playwright, because you really don't know. You know, is he going to talk? Is he going to insult my manhood? Is he going to call me a homosexual epithet? Is he going to just play with the language that I just used? What is he going to do? So he's really a wonderful wild card. So I think the scene, like I said, echoes the first scene of the play, getting to violence really quickly. I think it shows all the sort of tonal shifts that Mercutio is capable of, and maybe more than any other character in the play. And last thing is, I wonder if A Plague on Both Your Houses is just the final words of a body sort of comic character, or, and it could be an and/or, does this moment finally damn the characters as much as the opening sonnet does?
Yeah.
Because the word plague to you and I, although during COVID it may mean something else, but it obviously, without stating the complete obvious, you know, the original audience of this play, that word stings. Shakespeare, not by this time, had lost a son to it later.
Right.
So when he says in Hamlet, when he uses the word plague, like, he had lost a son to that. That word is personal. So it's not a throwaway word. So anyway, that whole scene, and particularly the sort of scope of like Mercutio's reference points, imagery, tone, it's really interesting. He's still a bastard, but I just think it's he's an awesome character, even though we don't have to like him.
Yeah.
Like, he's necessary in the play. You can't have him not there.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, I don't withhold. I mean, I'm with you. I like going through that line by line, because I wasn't, as much as we did, I don't have that down to do, you know. But I'm not shying away from a moral judgment on Mercutio. I think he is, you know, I think he is the hand grenade. He is, you know, and he is playing with a hand grenade with the pin pulled, and he likes to toss it up in the air and catch it, you know, and that's what he's always doing. He's supremely unserious in that way. Quite a contrast to Juliet, who's very serious and very careful, which I'm going to point out later too in this scene in a way that I think is really significant or dramatic. But so he's a great you know, piece of the story, like you say. But what if Tybalt? So I put down as my obvious but essential is that Tybalt dies, and to challenge the idea that it's essential, and I'll just ask you this question: what if Tybalt doesn't die in this play? What if he didn't die? It's kind of like you said. What if Romeo, you know, slept in that morning? But Tybalt's death is important. Is an important part of it. Or that's, I think, what we're saying. We're saying it's at the center. First of all, is it more important than Mercutio's death? What if Tybalt just killed Mercutio? Or whatever.
As a teacher, I just presume every question's real, even though most of my questions are rhetorical.
I saw your hand up, Jay.
That's right. I follow directions.
Yeah.
That's a really cool question to ask kids, I think. We'll obviously talk about it, but I love those questions because it reminds us that this play could have been otherwise. And I think sometimes when we read classic stories, there's sort of like, you know, statues on our desk that are these perfect, untouchable. No, we can critique. You can imagine this being otherwise, right? We know some of the plays probably existed in different editions and different iterations. There's different folios. So yeah, absolutely. It also makes them a little more human and approachable. Tybalt's death means the play has to move fast to a conclusion. And I think every moment, every play that I know well, somewhere in Act 3, there's a moment where there's a loss, an error in judgment, or something occurs to propel the story so it has to end and people can go home from the globe. But, you know, so I think this moment coupled with Romeo's father's, I think this is later in Act 4, but when Juliet's father says to her, "You're going to marry Paris Thursday."
Right.
Okay, now, so on Romeo's end, this is the moment that speeds up sort of his end.
Right.
And on Juliet's end, that's hers.
Right.
So I think it's like a speeding up. It's forcing momentum.
Yeah, I think it does.
Otherwise, we just have a bunch of, you know, people either in love or stewing or angry or.
Right.
You know.
Right. Because if Tybalt doesn't die, let's say just Tybalt and Mercutio fought, Romeo didn't come into it. Because I think if we're looking for that moment of like in that traditional tragic, which something I want to think about more, maybe we could save this for our last reflection on the whole play, this question of what actually makes this a tragedy. Because I'm having trouble seeing Romeo as a tragic character himself in a way. All right. But if we're looking for that moment of that turn of the story where there's no going back and where the main character finds some kind of character flaw, some fatal flaw, some missing character trait or something, then this has to be it. That Romeo chases down Tybalt, loses his cool with his own, at the like losing your cool at the family reunion and killing, your cousin, right? That's,
even if he deserves it, which he does sometimes.
Yes. Oh, yes, he does. He's a punk, but
but he's family. God love him.
And but he's family. You can't choose your family. And that Romeo does that. He finds inside himself, I guess, if you want to go down this path, he finds inside himself the ability both to love truly deeply. I believe his love for Juliet, she brings out this great thing in him. He's also able to feel and be overwhelmed by rage and chase down and kill, and murder Tybalt when he returns. But what if Tybalt doesn't die? I mean, there's still a secret marriage that has to be fixed. There's still a Paris that's impending, right? That doesn't go away. So Tybalt's death doesn't take that away. His death might speed it up.
Right.
His dad, Juliet's mom says, "Oh, your dad has devised a plan to help bring you out of sorrow, whatever." So
it's almost be worth doing to create with a group of readers. What are the menu of creative writing options when Shakespeare's before he writes this scene?
Yeah.
So, like a chess player, he's probably imagining moves, right?
Right. You're moving these pieces.
Here we have murder in the street. That's good. That's good theater. We like that. The Groundlings like the murder in the street.
Yeah.
Right? The murder in the street.
Right.
We have banishment, which is like a death, fake poison, tombs. Okay, that's good. We like that. But to imagine other things.
Yeah.
Like, is there an attempt at a resolution with parents? Is there an attempt? Does the prince get involved?
Yes.
Is there a character we've never met that one could conjure that would either create really interesting conflict? Because what he creates is phenomenal. Really serious life or death conflict quickly. Yeah. Are there other ways one could do that?
Well, and I think there are ways to play out, but what you would be playing out would be essentially Friar Lawrence's plan working. Friar Lawrence's plan going to plan. Whatever he had in his head when
it's
he said,
a comedy then.
I'll marry these two and then it'll work, in the end.
Yeah.
And he'll find a way to, like he tells, he'll find a way to blaze the marriage and, make peace. So, you get the prince on your side, you tell the parents and somehow it's okay and you quell the expectations of Paris. Whatever Friar Lawrence thought he was going to do. But, and so all of that, I suppose, can still happen if Tybalt isn't dead. And so maybe this is, I'm trying to find the reason why this is essential. Once Tybalt is dead, none of that can happen. There is no peace between the families.
Absolutely.
So Friar Lawrence's whole plan is shot. Let's say he didn't, as we theorized, he didn't actually care about Romeo, but he cared about peace in the city. Well, that's over. I mean, they're not going to forgive. The two families are not going to, look at that. Our kids are in love. It's not forgivable now. Juliet's mom is talking about sending someone to poison that rogue, Romeo, and he'll have it. She'll have it done. She'll see him dead.
Yep.
So that's it. Reconciliation is off the table. All right. And that's where I would kind of double down on that point of love of this kind. Is not fit for this world. It can't live here.
And also I think what we're pointing to is, and again, I just keep going back to this as married people, we know that you do marry a network of friends and family. I mean, literally you marry a person, but, it's not as if we're hermits in marriage.
Right.
So when you marry Juliet, Tybalt's in your life. When you marry Romeo, Mercutio's in your life. You don't have to like them, but they're there. Yeah. And that's like an adult truth that when I was 15, I never thought of, I had crushes on girls, but I never thought of like, gee, I hope I get along with her Uncle Frank. Like it was just the girl.
Right. It doesn't matter. It's her. Right.
But the fact of the matter is, thoughtful love is aware that it's a network that this person comes from somewhere, and that somewhere is going to intersect with my life really quickly if I do this.
Right.
So this scene also does that. I mean, implicitly does that. You know.
Yeah.
It ends that.
Well, I think it is. You know, it's obvious. I love the obviousness of it. This double murder or death in the streets, but it is essential to moving to moving the plot along and to finding out. Like if you're trying to find out why doesn't love work in this world, you know, and we'll try to nail that down. I think there's a couple options there. One, you could seat that in a fatal flaw in Romeo, or maybe this is the play is a great deal about fate. We could just track fate as the unacknowledged main actor, you know, in this in this play too.
Hard to avoid with the first sonnet. Hard to avoid.
I know, and it keeps showing up. Romeo says it, each of them say it. You know, Romeo says it. Juliet said, "I'm fortune's fool," or he says before he goes into the party. You know, when he first meets Juliet, I have this portentous feeling that something's going to happen that's going to change my. Well, I don't know who's doing this, but whoever is has the steerage of my course, lead on. You know, fill the sails. So that's an an unpaid actor, you know, on the stage is fate here, but since Tybalt dies, it does give us our tragedy, and there's no way back. And I think one way to sum that up is to say Friar Lawrence's plan is over, right? He tips his king, you know, at that point in the game he's done. He doesn't, but you know the plot has changed.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you have for subtle but poignant? You know, so there's something here. Both of us are kind of focusing on this death scene in the street. It is the literal center of the play, and it is the obvious but essential in some big ways. But what's not so obvious?
I love juxtaposing reactions. So Juliet finds out that first that Tybalt's dead, and then Romeo, we have to say it correctly, is banished.
Yes, banished.
I love explaining that to students. So, but her reaction to Romeo's banishment, then followed by Romeo's reaction to his own banishment. So I'm just going to read a couple of moments.
Oh yeah, those are great.
This is 3-2, line 106.
Okay.
And the nurse is talking to Juliet, her mother and everything but biology.
Yeah.
Juliet, and again, to me, this is Juliet thinking through a traumatic moment. She's newly married, the happiest you're going to be, right?
Right.
Shall I speak ill of him that is my husband? And my poor Lord, what tongue shall smooth thy name when I, thy 3 hours wife, have mangled it? But wherefore, villain, didst thou kill my cousin? That villain cousin would have killed my husband. She's thinking, right? Out loud. Back, foolish tears, back to your native spring. Your tributary drops belong to woe, which you, mistaking, offer up to joy. My husband lives. That Tybalt would have slain, and Tybalt's dead that would have slain my husband. All this is comfort. But then she's not done. She still has feelings she wants to honor. Wherefore weep I then?
Yeah.
And then that's when she realized that the word banished, sorry, Paul.
Yeah, it's banished. I was just going to correct you.
Yeah. And then, man, line 149 on the next page. I will to my wedding bed in death, not Romeo, take my maidenhead. And I do explain what that means. I mean, maidenhead.
Yes.
So that death will be her spouse, not Romeo, her sexual spouse.
Yeah.
So, but her reaction isn't screaming and yelling and having a hissy fit. It's, again, very Juliet-like. It's, I'm going to ask the obvious questions and think through them in a deliberate fashion. So if you go to Act 3, Scene 3, line 31, it's the very top of page 143 in the Folgers. Friar Lawrence, Romeo had previously said, you know, there's no world outside of Verona walls. I'm screwed. I'm not with my wife. The world's ending. And Romeo says, and the poetry's great, but I just want to look at what he's thinking here. "'Tis torture and not mercy. Heaven is here where Juliet lives, and every cat and dog and little mouse, every unworthy thing lives here in heaven. You may look on her, but Romeo may not. More validity, more honorable state, more courtship lives in carrion flies than Romeo. They may seize on the white wonder of dear Juliet's hand." Okay, so we get it. And he reflects on the word banished, but it's all self-absorbed, how it affects me. There's very little thinking and there's loads of feeling. But I do love the line where he says, Friar Lawrence, line 58, use adversity's sweet milk philosophy to comfort thee. And I know as a former philosopher, you must love, hang up philosophy unless philosophy can make a Juliet. That's a good line.
All right, that's the T-shirt I'll wear.
That is good stuff. But what's fascinating to me is Friar Lawrence says, stand up, be a man.
Yeah.
Romeo goes to kill himself with Juliet doesn't do this. Romeo draws his dagger. It's page 149, line 117 or so.
Yeah.
Art thou a man? Thy form cries out thou art.
Yeah.
Had thou slain Tybalt, wilt thou slay thyself? But notice, the nurse doesn't have to say any of these things. The nurse doesn't have to remind Juliet that, hey, at least he's alive. Like, Juliet can do this all by herself in her brain, and Romeo needs an assist from an adult to remind him of just the facts of his life right now.
Yeah.
Because he's having a hissy fit that I think the stereotype would suggest the young girl would have.
Yes, that's right, which Friar Lawrence brings out, and he presses
Thy
even.
tears are womanish.
Yeah, but
says.
And he presses even further than that. Thy tears are womanish, thy wild acts make you seem like an unreasonable fury of a beast, an unseemly woman in a seeming man. You're not even a good woman.
You can imagine all the different women Friar Lawrence doesn't know at all, by the way. He's hanging out with plants and that's it.
Yeah. He says, you're not even a good beast, an ill-seeming beast in seeming both. Thou hast amazed me. Yeah, he calls Romeo on here. This is a crucial moment, I think, because he calls Romeo on breaking his vow. Essentially, that's the line that hurts the most.
Right.
By my holy order, I thought thy disposition better tempered. Hast thou slain Tybalt? Wilt thou slay thyself and slay thy lady that in thy life lives by doing damned hate upon thyself? He's telling him he's going to. Sorry, I thought it was a line. I thought it was running the line. Where does he say that? I think he says.
What's the line? This is Friar Lawrence on page 149.
Yes.
Or do you have different pagination than I do? I'm not sure.
No, we're in the same. Right. Line 132. 5. Thou shamest thy shape, thy love, thy wit, which, like a usurer, aboundest in all, and usest none in that true use indeed. I think he's saying, you shame your own love, and you take away. You're breaking your vow by killing yourself and ending the marriage you said you would stay in.
So he treats
with
this
your
as
love.
a canon law problem, and not a romantic problem.
Yeah.
Right, and that's a huge disconnect with the kid he's talking to.
Yeah,
don't you think?
But yes. But if that line lands, I don't know if it does, with Romeo as you're breaking the vow that you newly made in front of me. To live with your Juliet, then that might be something that speaks to Romeo. And Romeo does say at the end, that his attitude has changed, but his attitude changes
because of the plan Friar Lawrence contrives,
and I think because of the ring.
Yeah,
because of the ring. Nurse gives Romeo a ring. Hi, you make haste, for it grows very late. How well my comfort is revived by this.
Now, Paul, I have very little interest in talking gender theory.
Okay, but
however,
yes.
Let's imagine you're you and I and coworkers in the 1590s go to the Globe, and we have 1590s viewpoints.
Yeah.
Which character would we expect more to be excited by a ring, Romeo and Juliet? Isn't that weird? You expect Juliet to be like, look, he gave you this ring. Does that make you happy? Fine. Are we good?
Yeah.
But no. Juliet by herself reasons all this.
Right.
And Romeo's freaking out, and even takes Friar Lawrence it's one of the longest speeches in the play. Yeah,
that's right. And I want to give, since I was sort of picking on Friar Lawrence, I want to give him some credit here. I think there is wisdom in this, which the nurse says. I hate agreeing with the nurse, but she says, "Oh Lord, I could have stayed here all night to hear good counsel." Yeah, whatever, shut up. But she's right. It is good counsel. Each of his. There art thou happy. There art thou happy. Count your blessings. You have so many blessings that are just poured down on you. A pack of blessings that are light upon your back. So the subtle point then, to put it in a phrase for you, subtle but poignant, is the contrast and responses between Romeo and Juliet.
Right. Where reason and passion live in their responses to conflict.
Yeah. And they do break this, the stereotype. As we theorize, what would we expect if we were in the globe at this time?
Right.
It doesn't run that way. And back to my point, I keep using the word plausibility. And it's believable. I believe it. I see Romeo doing this. He was doing this at the beginning of the play.
Yep.
He was pouting and walking down in the woods and creating an artificial night by drawing the blinds, probably painted black, mascara under his eye, the whole thing. And Juliet never really went through that phase.
No.
Well, this lands right on my subtle but poignant, and I want to make it a thing. It is the ring. This is a subtle thing that you can read right through, and I have many times. But when I stop to think about it, it points us to some of the things you're talking about. The fact that she sends this ring along, Juliet knows. Not only does she do what you're saying, which is she manages her feelings and her thoughts, working them out loud in a pretty mature way, but she also does that for Romeo. Why does she send a ring? Because she knows Romeo might think, as he says, what does he say? Does she not think me some old murderer now? She's done with me, right?
Right.
I totally screwed it up. I pulled out.
She can't text him. This is all she can do.
Yeah. But it gives him the reassurance that he needs. She knows what he needs to hear from her. I'm still committed to you. And the ring is literally the symbol of it, the unbroken love. Right. And so she sends along. So she manages for herself. She also manages for Romeo. And she's right in more ways than maybe she could have guessed, in that, which is your point, he desperately needs it. He's thrown himself on the floor, and when he gets up, he's thinking about killing himself. Mm-hmm. All right, and so he has to be smacked around by Friar Lawrence and brought back to himself, to his sense of responsibility as a man. He has responsibilities in this marriage. He's not taking them on. So it's not a noble response, to say the least. But Juliet, we see in this ring, I think, again, that she's capable of bearing, and does bear, and I think it shows up in other places in the play we can talk about. She does bear the heavier load here. All right, she is she's carrying more weight right now. She did in the balcony scene, as you pointed out, Jay, in the last podcast. She's directing. She's the director of that little orchestra.
Yeah, very much.
And she is here too. She's getting them both through it.
That's true. She's in both of these reactions, while Romeo, there's no sense that he would try to do anything from a distance to make her feel better.
Yeah, no.
He's completely, when he first goes in Act 2 to her yard and hops the fence, that's a courageous act. But his whole, we were talking about in the last podcast, his first set of responses were, what life threw on her. There she is. She's beautiful. Her beauty. And she's wrestling with identity and bigger. She defaults to sort of a philosopher's way of looking at things quickly, and he's still in his own head.
Yep.
It seems.
Yep. He's stuck. Yeah, he is stuck there.
What about nagging questions?
Yeah, we're down there. We're down there to it, aren't we? Nagging question. Yeah, all this talk of Romeo, has brought me this question, which is articulated this way: what blame does Romeo bear for killing Tybalt? Right? What blame does he bear for this? I don't really know how to play that out entirely. That feels like a question that's above, Mercutio's death. I guess just. And the options here are fate, that this was one of those things that we're supposed to read as being unavoidable. If your best friend is just killed in front of you in the street, does it seem fair to ask Romeo to continue being great-souled and open-hearted toward his enemy? That is pushing. It makes me sympathize with this rash, murderous act, because consider the circumstances.
Sure.
He didn't seek him out. All right, none of the things. He was trying to stop it, all of that. But at the same time, I'm driven a little bit by this thing outside the text, which is sort of this Aristotelian, look at what tragedy is made of, and I'm primed to look for a failure, in the character, and maybe that's not fair. I don't want to bring that in if it doesn't belong. but at the same time, some of these weaknesses we've been talking about Romeo, maybe he bears the blame for being this rash, emotional, self-absorbed person who couldn't stop and say, even in the throes of being married to Juliet, say, I can't avenge my my kind of broken friend's death and see it as a great deal his own fault. He's not able to do it.
What happens if Romeo doesn't do that? Tybalt kills Mercutio, and Romeo just gets the prince. Mercutio then is executed in a court of law, and I don't know.
Or Tybalt.
Tybalt, I should say. And then the play is different. I mean, it's obviously not where he wanted to go. He wanted bolder, bigger, more dramatic conflicts, fights in the streets. Fights in a tomb, poison. I mean, it's obviously way better theater than,
Right. And maybe then, like we said, Friar Lawrence's plan works then. People are in, there's sympathy, and Tybalt didn't have to die for it. Mercutio died. He's kind of on the, the Montague side.
Right.
Maybe it actually helps, Friar Lawrence's plan,
Yeah, my nagging question, I think, stems from the fact that we both teach in an all-boys school.
Yeah.
And I think the play has really interesting things to say about masculinity and femininity, and particularly the difference between people's preconceived notions versus what's happening in real life around them. Romeo's reading of masculinity and femininity are very consistent, and they're never played out in the play. So we can see over and over again Juliet's strength, Juliet's far superior intelligence, Juliet's much greater discipline when reacting to difficult situations, a version of courage, certainly as much courage. I mean, she's not fighting in the Trojan War or anything, but this is courage for a 13-year-old girl in Verona at this time.
Yep.
But still, when Mercutio dies, one of Romeo's best friends, and he's having a moment of conscience, as if that's bad. Do I stay happily married to my wife or do this thing that is sort of appropriate in the context I'm in now, avenge my friend's death? The fact that he hesitates leads him to say, "Oh, sweet Juliet, thy beauty hath made me effeminate."
Yes.
But the play doesn't look like that.
Okay.
So,
where's that line, Jay? Sorry, you didn't have it. Sorry, you were
it's
that's all right.
After Mercutio dies, and Romeo is trying to figure out what to do, and
No, I got you. It makes you effeminate, but that's not how the chief female in the play would have acted.
I'm not out to convince our boys. It's not so simple as, see, girls are smart too. It has to live in the context of the world, and I just think it's a hugely rebellious, renegade, gutsy move by a playwright in the 50s, 90s to have in the mouth of some characters what probably most of the audience felt about men and women, but have the events of the play flip it. That's a really it's one of those moments where an artist makes people uncomfortable intentionally. I feel that's an intentional discomfort. We can talk about it politically, sure, we can.
Right.
It also is good theater because you're suddenly thrust in a world where you're not sure who can have power and who can't, who gets a voice and who can't. That not only we can discuss it from a social justice point of view, which is fine. It just makes for good theater, though.
Right.
The fact that people that aren't supposed to be strong and powerful can be is great.
Yes. And that it's believable. I think we like to think in our own times, our discoveries are the things.
She's not suddenly this way.
No.
Right. Exactly.
No.
Yeah.
And it has to work as a story. People in the audience, and I'm assuming they didn't, given Shakespeare's success in his lifetime, say, "Oh, come on," like that would never happen or something.
Yeah.
But that it works enormously for them, not for us. Of course, we love to hear it. We're in a time that is very, very interested in shaking up, gender norms and stereotypes.
Right.
Fine. Were they? I don't think so. But it works for them. Mm-hmm. They're open to seeing both sides of it, where the stereotype comes from, how the breaking of it works. Mm-hmm. And there's many other examples of it in this play, right? Just even the fact that they're getting married and, pursuing their own self-driven interests in each other, drives against a whole, elaborate social order.
Of the world of the play, and I would argue the world of the original audience at the Globe. And I might have said very early on in one of the podcasts, how strange this would have been to watch for a regular person. Like, it's the equivalent of us watching Star Wars.
Right. But they're
Really,
selling tickets, right? But he's selling tickets. So this isn't
believable exactly what you're saying.
Right. This was not a play for university professors or something, right?
Not at
Who
all.
are the only people who could appreciate it. Is it anything like that? No. This has to work for the ordinary audience members who are standing down on the play watching it, right?
And as teachers,
and it does.
I think as teachers, that's such an important point.
Yeah.
Because now it's real easy to look at this as the property of the intellectual class.
Yeah.
Which is completely the opposite of the original intent.
Right.
And that it's the human beings going through incredible things, beautiful moments, tragic. Let's watch this and let's So I think that's a really great point. And if you strip away the need to sound smart in a classroom and you just look at these people,
yes,
and you look at the words and that they're saying to each other, I think kids can plug into it.
I do too, and I love the way you put that. That's what I'm always driving for. Some version of that. Not trying to sound smart, not trying to sound like anything.
Right.
Just read it, take it seriously, and read it, and respond.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of the Spark Note approach, of which I want nothing to do with.
I had a kid. I mean, just really quick. I had a kid this year say, and he's a kind of an average student. Doesn't love reading, and he does his homework and is nice kid. He connected to the fact that these families hate each other because he has a grandmother who doesn't like an aunt that married into the family because something happened at some wedding, but it was like in 1973.
Yeah.
Right? So that was a while ago, Paul, 1973.
Yeah. Right.
But this kid knows all these family stories, and he's like, yeah, it isn't crazy to me that a lot of these people that don't get invited to stuff now, like family was from something from like literally the Nixon administration.
Right.
And this kid who's 14 knows that and sees like weird. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's part of the oxygen this place breathing all the time. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. They can identify with it even now, which is in itself kind of a shocking point maybe. But also the way I like the irony and the insight it gives us into our understanding of just historical pronouncements about the way things were, and this is what artists I think continually do, and Shakespeare does really well when we want to tell a very simple story, especially one about gender. Let's say Shakespeare and others too remind us it's more complicated than that. It's not exactly what you think. At all. This audience had the potential for something very different than our generalized gloss on history would have us believe or allow us to understand.
And just dovetailing off that, I think not only are different authors in Shakespeare's time, different texts, different times of literature, epics, saying different things about gender. Literally, every character is saying different things about gender in this one play.
Yeah.
So it's infinitely diverse and complicated, like you're saying. It's just these aren't caricatures. These are real human beings.
Yes.
These human beings are more real than some real human beings.
Yes, they are. Which has been my 2 big points about right? I mean, that's my summary points. Romeo is a real person, realer than many people we know. Juliet the same. She has a capacity that is beyond our own in many ways. Yeah. And I wanted to say, maybe I'll do this, something we got to think about. Maybe for the final episode of this, I have some tape of 9th grade students audio of them fighting about this play. I think that'd be really interesting to hear, because that's something you almost couldn't believe is possible. And parents challenge me on that before we teach it. My son can't read this play, he doesn't understand it, all of which is true. Yet year to year, I know you've had this experience too. Mm-hmm. They become more intensely engaged in a play that they kind of don't understand, but they understand enough. They grab onto things like you're saying, generational animosity.
And there's great productions of it that are readily available. I think it's really vital to see it and hear it, because that was the original intention. And I think we all as teachers try to really highlight the vital. I mean, it's all vital, but there are these iconic scenes that kids need to wrap their heads around. That if we walk them through it in a helpful way, and also just not sharpshooting them. I mean, I don't give them quizzes on what color Juliet's drapes are. I just don't do that. It's more writing and reacting and using quotes and wrestling with language. And as long as they know they don't have to read with that paranoid voice in their head, that I have to understand all of this. Yeah. If you take fear away and just say, pay attention to what you know, what you're noticing.
Yes.
I think taking away anxiety makes comprehension, it's not easy, but it makes it a lot more possible than that fearful, paranoid reading of, I'm going to get quizzed tomorrow on all this minutia and oh my God. So,
right. That fact-based approach to the stories, there's something to that, obviously. But that one serves software a little better. As far as inviting students into a humanities-styled conversation, more the former that you're describing is better, which is, this is not a fear-based thing. This is written for humans. You are a human person. Read this thing, take it seriously, and let's talk about it as you are, 14-year-old inexperienced reader, and let's go. That's inviting. That's setting the stage for a lifelong, meal at this table. Yeah,
right, absolutely. You know, when you go to college, you don't have to be a Shakespeare scholar to buy a ticket to a Shakespeare play if your friend's in one. Just go. Just go and enjoy it.
Right.
Life isn't about writing a succession of thesis papers.
Yeah.
These are human beings in these stories. So anyway.
Well, I think that's good. That gets us right to the dead center of the play. It's all downhill from here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Doug,
if you want it to be a comedy, just stop reading. We're good.
Yeah.
This is it.
Right. That's it. They're
married. Wonderful. They just have to have a long distance marriage.
Wasn't that beautiful? Yeah, they'll be together soon, though. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, fire alarms will work it out. Yeah.
I mean, what could go wrong?
No, nothing. I mean, just plan it out on paper and you do it. We'll fix this problem right now.
Yes.
Just like our governor, just like our presidents, just like every great politician I know that I've ever voted for. Same for you, Jim.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, no joke.
Yeah, I've always voted solely for Friar Lawrence. And
that's right.
And it's always worked out this way. Everyone's dead in the end.
So. Well, I look forward to our chapter 4 conversation because really crazy stuff happens. So.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about. All right. Hey, I'll see you next time with Act 4. Thanks, Jay.
Perfect. See you, Paul.